I had my first girlfriend when I was 19 and I'm fine. For as long as I could remember, I had been the quiet one. In school, I was the guy who blended into the background, sitting at the back of the class, avoiding attention. I wasn't the most popular, nor the most athletic. I wasn't the class clown, and I didn't have a huge group of friends, but I didn't mind. I had always been content in my own space, with my thoughts and my books, my small circle of acquaintances, but there was always something in the back of my mind, something I couldn't shake. It was the constant awareness that everyone else seemed to be moving faster than me. When my friends started talking about their first dates, their first kisses, their first loves, I felt a wave of unease. I knew that I wasn't like them. I wasn't the guy who could just walk up to a girl and start a conversation, let alone ask one out on a date. I watched as my friends navigated relationships with ease, as if it were second nature. I didn't know where to start or what to say, and it seemed like the more time passed, the further away that world became from me. By the time I turned 19, I had convinced myself that I was fine, that it didn't matter. I was focused on other things, my studies, my part-time job, the little hobbies I kept to myself, but deep down, there was this gnawing feeling that I was missing out on something. I couldn't quite explain it, but the idea of love, of real, human connection seemed distant, like it was something other people got to experience, not me. That's when she came into my life. She was quiet too, in a way that mirrored me. She had this softness about her, an introverted energy that drew me in without overwhelming me. We met through mutual friends, at a gathering that neither of us really wanted to be at. She was standing off to the side, looking just as out of place as I felt. We struck up a conversation about something trivial, a movie we both had seen. The conversation was awkward at first, like two strangers trying to make sense of each other, but somehow it felt comfortable, easy, even. We had a quiet understanding, an unspoken recognition that we both were outsiders, figuring out how to be a part of the world around us. In the weeks that followed, we spent more time together. We didn't go on extravagant dates or have grand gestures. Instead, we shared small moments, coffee runs, quiet walks in the park, exchanging playlists of music we loved. It wasn't anything flashy, but it felt real. I could see something in her eyes, a depth I hadn't seen in anyone before. She had a kindness that made me feel understood, and I, for the first time, felt like maybe I wasn't as lost as I had thought. The first time we held hands was unexpected. We were walking down the street, laughing about something silly, when our fingers brushed. For a brief moment, I hesitated. It felt like such a simple thing, but it was a world away from where I had been. I had never held anyone's hand before, never experienced the comfort of that simple gesture. But there it was, our hands intertwined, and for the first time, I felt a sense of connection that I had never known. As the weeks turned into months, our relationship deepened. I started to open up to her in ways I had never done with anyone before. I shared my fears, my insecurities, the little things that kept me awake at night. She listened. She didn't judge. I could feel myself becoming more vulnerable, more real, and it scared me. I had spent so much of my life keeping my emotions locked away, afraid of being too much or too little. But with her, I felt seen for who I was. And that terrified me as much as it comforted me. There were moments of doubt. Moments when I questioned if I was enough, if I could really be someone she wanted in her life. I had never been the guy who knew how to express his feelings, never been the smooth talker or the one who had all the answers. I was just me, awkward and certain, sometimes too much in my own head. But somehow, she saw beyond that. She saw me. The first time we kissed was not dramatic. It wasn't some grand movie scene where the world stopped and everything became clear. It was simple. A moment where our eyes met, and everything felt aligned, and then, without a word, she kissed me. And that kiss, gentle, sweet, tentative, was everything I didn't know I had been waiting for. It was the kind of kiss that made everything else in the world fade into the background. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, even though I had no idea what I was doing. I still remember the moments after that kiss. We both sat there in a kind of stunned silence, not sure what to say or do next. I wasn't used to being this close to someone. I wasn't used to the vulnerability that came with it, but it felt right. The world didn't stop spinning, but in that instant, I realized that maybe I didn't need to have it all figured out. Maybe I didn't need to be perfect or know exactly how to navigate this relationship. All I had to do was show up and be myself, and for the first time, that felt enough. We continued to grow closer, and though there were times when I felt unsure of myself, unsure of how to be in a relationship, I knew that she was patient with me. She didn't rush me or expect me to be someone I wasn't. She allowed me to figure it out in my own time, and in doing so, I started to learn what it meant to truly be with someone, not just in the sense of sharing experiences, but in the deeper sense of being vulnerable, trusting, and allowing myself to be loved. By the time I turned 20, I realized that I wasn't the same person I was when I had first met her. I had grown not in leaps and bounds, but in quiet, subtle ways. I wasn't the guy who was afraid to love anymore. I wasn't the guy who thought he wasn't good enough for someone else's affection. I was learning that love wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up for each other, about growing together, about being patient with each other's flaws and insecurities. The relationship wasn't perfect. There were bumps along the way, miscommunications, moments of doubt, moments of fear. But we both learned how to navigate those challenges together. And in the end, what I learned was that it's okay not to have it all figured out, especially when it comes to love. You don't have to be perfect to experience something real. I had been terrified of love for so long, convinced that I wasn't enough, that I was too late to the game. But I wasn't. I was just right where I needed to be. I had my first girlfriend at 19, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally, truly, living. And though I didn't have all the answers, I realized that was okay. Because love wasn't something you could map out or predict. It was something you learned by showing up, by being present, and by allowing yourself to be vulnerable. And somehow, despite all my doubts, despite all the years of waiting, I had found it, and it was worth the wait. As time passed, the relationship began to settle into a rhythm. It wasn't the whirlwind kind of love you see in movies. There were no grand gestures or constant thrills. Instead, it was the steady, grounding kind of love that built over time. We spent weekends exploring the little corners of the city, visiting art galleries, walking down quiet streets with no destination in mind. The simplicity of those moments filled me in ways I didn't know were possible. There were times when I still felt unsure of myself, like I wasn't doing enough or giving enough. She seemed so confident in herself, so sure of what she wanted, and I often wondered if she had picked the wrong person. I still wasn't the guy who always knew the right thing to say. I had my quirks and my fears, but little by little, I realized that she accepted me for who I was, awkwardness and all. Her patience with me helped me loosen the grip I had on my own insecurities. I started to see the ways in which I had been holding myself back. I had been afraid of being vulnerable, afraid that if I opened up too much, I would get hurt. But with her, I learned that vulnerability didn't have to be a weakness. It was a bridge that connected us, allowing us to understand each other in ways I hadn't thought possible. The more I let my guard down, the more I realized that I was no longer afraid of love. It was no longer a thing to be feared, but a thing to be nurtured. I also began to see how much my past had shaped the way I approached relationships. Growing up, I had always watched others around me enter relationships with ease. I saw them go through the ups and downs, but I never truly understood what it took to make a relationship work. I'd spent years avoiding it, convinced that I wasn't ready or capable of giving myself fully to someone else. But now, with her, I could see that love was about compromise, about understanding, and about growing together through the good times and the bad. One evening, after a particularly long day, we sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching a movie. The house was quiet, save for the soft sounds of the film and the occasional rustle of the blanket. It wasn't anything extraordinary, just two people sharing a peaceful moment. I looked over at her, her head resting against my shoulder, her eyes fixed on the screen. And in that moment, I realized how much I had changed, how much I had grown. In this relationship, I had been so unsure of myself, so afraid of the future, and yet, in her presence, I began to feel anchored. For the first time, I could imagine a future where I wasn't just living for myself, but sharing my life with someone else. I wasn't ready for marriage or any big life milestones, but I knew that this relationship was something real, something worth holding on to. That night, I stayed awake a little longer than usual, my mind racing with thoughts. I thought about how far I'd come from the shy and certain boy who had never known what it was like to love, to the man who had learned to open his heart and trust someone else. I wasn't perfect, and neither was she, but together, we made something that felt genuine. It wasn't about sweeping romance or an idealized version of love, it was about being to people, flaws and all, choosing each other every day. The days continued to pass by, and as our relationship deepened, I noticed how much I had started to let go of my past fears. I stopped comparing myself to others, stopped wondering why I hadn't been in love earlier. Instead, I focused on what I had in front of me. And what I had in front of me was someone who made me feel seen, who accepted me, and who cared for me in ways I had never thought possible. There were still moments of doubt, those quiet, solitary hours when my mind would wander back to old insecurities, when I'd question whether I was good enough for her, or whether I could be the partner she deserved. But every time, I would remind myself of all the little things that made us work, how we could talk for hours without ever running out of things to say, how we found comfort in the silence, how we understood each other without needing to explain ourselves. I realized that love wasn't something I had to chase or force. It wasn't about timing or fitting some ideal image, it was about connection. I had been waiting for the right time my entire life, convinced that I wasn't ready, that I had to be someone else first. But when I met her, it was as if I had finally found the missing piece of myself, the person who could see me, all of me, and still want to be there. At 19, I had my first girlfriend. At 19, I learned that love wasn't something you could plan for or control. It was something you could only experience when you were ready to embrace it, in all its messy, beautiful forms. And as I stood beside her, day after day, I realized that I was exactly where I needed to be, not perfect, but real. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to be truly, completely, in love. As the months stretched into years, the quiet moments between us began to mean more than anything else. Life had a way of moving quickly, and the world around us kept changing, but in our little corner of it, time seemed to slow down just enough for us to enjoy the simplicity of being together. We didn't need extravagant dates or grand gestures to feel connected, just the everyday acts of kindness, the comfort of shared silence, and the quiet joy of knowing someone had your back, no matter what. But even as I found myself growing more comfortable in the relationship, I couldn't escape the remnants of doubt that still lingered in the corners of my mind. There were times when I felt like I wasn't enough for her, when I saw the way other people in our circle held their relationships together with a kind of ease that felt so foreign to me. I wondered if I was doing enough, being enough. There were moments when I felt like I was fumbling through it all, unsure of how to be the partner she deserved. Yet, every time that fear crept in, she would reach out her hand, her words, her quiet gestures reminding me that it wasn't about perfection. It was about being there for each other, showing up even when things felt uncertain. She never asked for perfection from me. In fact, she never asked for anything at all. It was in the way she accepted me, flaws and all, that I began to realize that love wasn't about fulfilling some ideal image of what it should be. It was about connection, respect, and the willingness to be vulnerable with each other. There were, of course, moments when we struggled. No relationship, no matter how quiet or simple, is without its challenges. There were days when the stress of life, work, and the constant push and pull of our individual dreams weighed heavily on both of us. We had arguments, moments where we were both frustrated and unsure of how to communicate, but through those struggles, I learned the true meaning of compromise. I learned that it wasn't about winning or being right, it was about finding a way to move forward, together, even when the path wasn't clear. Through it all, I saw how much we had both changed since we first met. I had come a long way from the boy who had spent so many years alone, wondering what it would feel like to be seen and loved. I had learned how to open my heart to someone, to share my fears and my joys without the walls I had built around myself. And she, too, had grown. Her quiet strength and patience had helped me see the world through a different lens. She had taught me that love didn't need to be a dramatic, life-altering force. Sometimes, love was simply in the everyday moments: the touch of a hand, the shared look across the room, the comforting presence of someone who truly understood you. One evening, as we sat together, sipping tea on the couch after a long day, I found myself reflecting on everything we had shared. The past was full of uncertainty and fear, but the present felt different. I could see how much we had built together, how much we had grown. We had learned each other's rhythms, found comfort in the spaces between our words, and created a kind of love that was steady and grounding. In that moment, I realized that I had never been so sure of anything in my life. Not because everything was perfect, but because we had made it work, because we had chosen each other every single day, even when things weren't easy. It wasn't about the milestones or the future plans. It was about the journey we had taken together, and the way we had navigated the ups and downs of life as partners, side by side. I had my first girlfriend at 19, but more than that, I had found someone who had helped me discover who I truly was, someone who had shown me that love wasn't about timing or waiting for the perfect moment. It was about showing up, being present, and embracing the messy beauty of life together. And now, as I sat next to her, I knew I had come to a place of peace with myself and with her. I wasn't the same person I had been at 19. I had learned that love, in its purest form, is not something you find, but something you create together, with patience, understanding, and the willingness to be vulnerable. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. As time continued to move forward, I found myself falling into a deeper sense of contentment that I hadn't experienced before. The first few years of our relationship had been filled with excitement, discovery, and a sense of awe that we were both so fortunate to have found each other. But as the novelty of a new relationship settled into something more permanent, I began to see the true beauty of what we had built. There were no longer butterflies in my stomach every time she walked into the room, but the comfort I felt in her presence was profound in its own way. It wasn't about the adrenaline or the excitement anymore. It was about the quiet understanding between us, the ease with which we existed in each other's lives. We didn't have to constantly impress one another or chase after the next big thing. We were enough as we were. Our relationship was a reflection of that understanding, a balance of deep affection and shared experience. Yet, as much as I had grown, there were still moments of doubt. I began to look around at other relationships, and sometimes I felt like maybe we weren't doing enough. People around us were reaching milestones I hadn't considered: engagements, marriages, moving in together. And here we were, still in the same place, in the same steady rhythm, without any grand plans in motion. It wasn't that I didn't want those things with her more than anything, I did. But I had come to realize that it wasn't about the timeline of life or comparing our journey to others. It was about the journey itself, the way we had crafted our love, and how much more I understood about what love truly was. I no longer measured love by external milestones, but by the way we had grown together, how we had weathered storms and basked in the sunshine of the simpler moments. And then, one day, I found myself facing a decision that felt almost as daunting as the decision to enter a relationship in the first place. We had been together for a few years now, and it was clear that we had something solid, something worth holding on to, but I still wasn't sure about what the future should look like. The idea of commitment, of forever, had always scared me. But this time, it was different. I wasn't afraid of forever anymore. I realized that I wasn't worried about what came next because I trusted her, trusted us. Whatever the future held, we would face it together. I finally understood what true commitment meant, not a sense of obligation or pressure, but a deep, unshakable bond between two people who had chosen each other. Time and time again, with this newfound clarity, I began to make plans for the future. I didn't know exactly what that would look like, but I knew that I wanted to take the next steps with her by my side. The idea of marriage no longer felt like something I should do or that I had to do. It felt like something I wanted to do, because the person I had become in her presence was someone I was proud of, and I wanted to build that life with her. As we continued our quiet existence, building memories together, I found myself reflecting on how far we had come. My journey from the shy and certain boy who had never known love to the man who now understood the quiet, steady power of connection felt like a lifetime in itself, and yet, it had only been a few years. It was a reminder that sometimes, the best things take time not because we need to earn them, but because they require patience, trust, and the willingness to grow together. I had my first girlfriend at 19, but more than that, I had found someone who had shown me that love wasn't about instant gratification or living up to some ideal. It was about the quiet moments, the laughter over nothing at all, the way our hands fit together perfectly, and how she knew when I needed space, but also when I needed a hug. I had learned, in ways that words couldn't express, that love wasn't a destination, it was a journey, one where the destination didn't matter as much as the road we traveled together. Looking back, I realized that I was fine, not because I had all the answers or had figured out the complexities of life and love, but because I had found someone who made it feel less complicated. Someone who loved me for who I was, and who I had come to love more deeply than I ever thought possible. And for the first time in my life, I knew that I was enough, just as I was, with all my imperfections and quirks. In her presence, I understood that love doesn't come with expectations. It doesn't come with a timeline or a list of accomplishments. It's a quiet and spoken promise, built slowly over time, nurtured in the spaces between words, in the gestures that don't require grand declarations. It was, and is, simply enough, and with that, I realized that the love I had longed for wasn't something to be found, it was something to be lived, nurtured, and appreciated every single day. And for the first time, I was truly content.